Well, obviously I feel the need to keep on ranting here, and I'm not done with Louie's video here. Hello again, Louie. So, let's go back to your video, to the ending of the video here. Give me just a minute. I've got to find it here on my computer. Here we go.
We're taking away their taxes. Obviously, I like what Ella said. She said that it has to do with revenue, and that's going to be the next issue. The Republicans are going to say, well, how are we going to fund the government? See, they're talking big now. Oh, we don't need any money to fund the government. We don't need a government. We want the smallest government possible.
Well, of course they want the smallest government possible because it benefits corporations. So as long as corporations benefit from it and control the government, well, then government needs to take a step back. That is, government by the people should take a step back. I mean, it's no big surprise that the Republican Party for quite some time has not been for the average working person in this country. They've always been for big business. I mean, this should come as no surprise to anyone, except that the corruption within the Republican Party and even some conservative notions, you know, in terms of overreach, have been so corrupted, even within the Republican Party, that it has moved so far to the right. And I'm not just faulting the Republicans here. I'm also faulting the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is essentially owned by the same financial elite as the Republicans as of this time. This is not something we can just ignore. We can all wish for the older days in which the Democratic Party stood up for the working class and the average citizen and all that. But beginning, at the very least, with Clinton and these free trade agreements, NAFTA and so on, that all undermined the middle class here in America. But as long as people refuse to see that there is corruption on both sides, we're not ever going to find a solution. On to your back to your video.
Sounds great. Okay, but you know, then regulations are stripped, and we've already been convinced that by the Tea Party that regulations are bad. And then we see what happened with the BP oil spill.
Oh, of course, yes. Well, the populace is always going to be told that regulations are bad. Now, if it weren't for some regulations, at least, okay, you wouldn't have any safe food to eat, nor any safe drinking water in this country. And that's just for starters. The problem comes in when these regulations are being regulated by the very CEOs who promote these destructive practices, and thus regulation is actually useless once the regulatory bodies are controlled by the very industries that they're supposed to have oversight over. So it's not regulation per se that is bad. In fact, I'm all for regulation, but not idiotic regulation, which is promoted by the very industry that it is supposed to oversee. So this is where this big corruption thing comes in. So if you don't want any regulations at all, and I agree with you completely, Louie, if you want to deregulate, you know, Wall Street and all of that, well, then you get exactly what we're seeing today. This is the result, not of over-regulation, But regulation, which poses as regulation when it actually isn't. And this is what the majority of people don't understand. When the regulatory bodies, which are supposed to be composed of, some ordinary citizens at least, become corrupted, well, then that's exactly what you're going to get, is what we're seeing today.
Which all these people who were preaching regulation is bad are the same people. I saw the movie AstroTurf Wars. These are the same people that were preaching regulation is bad. And then we had the oil disaster. Oh, we're not going to, come on. It was like a joke until it really happened. But anyway, hope everybody had a great Christmas. Just,
Well, screw Christmas. I'm not a big Christmas person. So, I hope everybody had a good holiday. I don't mean that as an offense, but, we've got more important things to worry about than Christmas holidays at this point. So, we are facing, like I said, humongous problems which are not going to be solved overnight. And this entire prospect of globalization has brought essentially about a situation in which ordinary people are pitted against each other for the benefit of the very few at the top, for the very sake of growth, continued growth, which is for the most part unsustainable, and to create a competitive labor environment in which nobody in the end will win. I mean, it's completely unrealistic. All this talk about, well, we have to stay competitive, and all this CEO talk. Our economy has to stay competitive. Competitive as compared to what? Competitive as compared to what? Do these CEOs really expect functioning democracies to agree to the kind of slave wages paid in China or India? Now, granted, this whole scheme is rising up, or rather is bringing up a middle class in those other nations. But remember, this is only going to be short-lived, because as soon as those very same people recognize that they have some rights, okay, and as soon as they start to demand some fair shares, they are also going to be crushed. So it's a never-ending game. So that's all I'm saying. So we can't agree to the lowest common denominator here in terms of wages and labor, because what it's going to end up at is basically slave wages across the entire globe, until the elites up top have basically robbed the entire damn planet of resources and so on, and move on to their little islands and hope to survive there in their isolated communities. Well, I hate to tell you this, but reality really doesn't work that way. So, what to do? What to do? The first thing we need to do is to stop cooperating with this bullshit. And this needs to come from citizens in the developed countries who have enjoyed those privileges on the backs of others, whether they were aware of it or not. Because the people in other nations, they have no voice. And we need to find common voices all across the board in order to oppose this shit. But as I said, you know, global movements take time. Well, I shouldn't say take time, it's never happened before. It's a grand big experiment, you know. I'm not sure if I'm in agreement with some people who say that the situation is completely hopeless. But you need to look reality in the face, and we need to face what we're up against here. Our own living standards in our own Western societies are non-sustainable at the rate that we're going. We need to scale back in terms of our consumption of complete bullshit, the latest electronic gadgets and so on, every 3 or 4 years, you know. And we're all guilty of this because this is the world we live in, you know. So I'm just as much a hypocrite as anyone else here. But it's gonna come to an end, all of this. And it doesn't mean we have to go back to, you know, the forest and live in the jungle. But we do need to realize that too much is too much. You know, there are billions of people on the planet who are starving. And just because we don't see them doesn't mean they aren't there. Thanks for the video, Louie.